The morning sun spilled golden light across the village, chasing away the chill of the night. Birds sang their cheerful tunes, and the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze brought the world to life. Abeke's fingers moved quickly, plucking herbs from the soft earth beneath the towering baobab tree. Its wide branches stretched to the heavens, heavy with secrets older than anyone could remember. "Don't pick the dry ones, Ofori," she called over her shoulder, her tone firm but kind. Her younger brother, Ofori, knelt nearby, fiddling with a weed he had mistaken for medicine. At 10 years old, Ofori's curiosity often got ahead of him, and Abeke, at 17, had taken it upon herself to guide him. I know, Ofori muttered, tossing the weed aside. "But how can you tell which ones are right? They all look the same." Abeke smiled, brushing dirt from her hands. "The right ones smell like rain after a storm," she said, holding up a bright green leaf. "See? Fresh and alive. They carry strength inside them, just like us." Ofori sniffed the leaf and wrinkled his nose. "Smells like mud to me," she laughed, the sound warm and full of life. "That's because you're not paying attention. One day, when I'm the healer of this village, you'll be thanking me for teaching you all this." The baobab tree stood above them, its thick trunk seeming to hum with quiet wisdom. Villagers often said it had seen everything: wars, peace, love, and loss. It was more than just a tree. It was a guardian, a witness to the village's story. Abeke liked to think it listened to her dreams, storing them in its roots until she was ready to make them real. "Abeke!" A voice called from beyond the clearing. It was Nana Ajoa, the village elder. Her wrinkled face was as familiar as the baobab's bark, her eyes sharp and knowing. She leaned on her carved walking stick, her presence commanding respect. "What is it, Nana?" Abeke asked, wiping her hands on her skirt. "The hunters returned with news," Nana said, her tone heavy. "They saw strangers in the forest, men with weapons." A cold knot formed in Abeke's stomach. She exchanged a glance with Ofori, whose playful expression had turned serious. Strangers meant danger. Raiders, slavers, men who tore families apart and sold them into lives of unimaginable suffering. "When did they see them?" Abeke asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Last night," Nana said. "We don't know their intentions yet, but we must prepare. Tell your mother to come to the meeting under the baobab at dusk." Abeke nodded, the weight of the elder's words settling on her. As Nana Ajoa shuffled away, Ofori tugged at her sleeve. "Do you think they'll come here?" he asked, his voice small. Abeke knelt to face him, brushing a strand of curly hair from his forehead. "We don't know yet," she said softly. "But no matter what happens, I'll keep you safe. I promise." Ofori's eyes, wide with trust, searched hers. "Like the hero in the story you told me, the one who fought the monsters." "Exactly like that," she said, her smile returning. "Now, let's finish gathering these herbs. If the village needs medicine, we'll be ready." As the sun climbed higher, they worked in silence, the looming shadow of the baobab stretching across the clearing. Abeke's thoughts raced, her fingers trembling slightly as she worked. She had heard the stories of what happened to villages taken by slavers. The thought of her brother, her family, her people in chains. It was too much to bear. But beneath her fear, something stronger stirred. The baobab's roots ran deep, anchoring it to the earth through countless storms. Abeke clenched her fists, drawing strength from its presence. She would do whatever it took to protect her home, her family, and the dreams she held close to her heart. As the afternoon wore on, the village bustled with whispers of preparation. Mothers gathered their children close. Fathers sharpened tools that could double as weapons, and elders prayed under the baobab's wide branches. Abeke and Ofori returned home, their baskets full of herbs and their hearts heavy with uncertainty. That night, as the first stars blinked into the sky, Abeke sat beside Ofori under the baobab tree. She told him a story, her voice steady and soothing, about a brave girl who faced impossible odds to save her people. And did she win? Ofori asked, his voice thick with sleep. She did, Abeke whispered, stroking his hair, because she had love and courage, and she never gave up. As Ofori drifted off, Abeke looked up at the baobab tree, its branches reaching into the dark sky like a shield. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She would fight with everything she had to keep her people free. Beneath the baobab's shadow, the first seeds of resistance took root. The sun hung low in the sky, its golden rays kissing the tops of the baobab tree's sprawling branches. Abeke sat by the riverbank, washing the last of the herbs her mentor had asked her to gather. She hummed a soft tune, glancing at Ofori as he skipped stones across the water. His laughter, bright and full of life, echoed in the quiet of the late afternoon. But even as the river sang its usual tune, something felt wrong. The birds were quieter than normal, and the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew a storm was coming. Abeke felt it too, a strange heaviness in the air that she couldn't quite explain. She stood up, brushing dirt from her skirt. Ofori, it's time to go back. Ofori groaned, flinging one last stone. Just one more, Abeke. I almost got it to skip 4 times. Now, Abeke said, her voice firm. She reached for his hand, pulling him away from the riverbank. We shouldn't stay out after sunset. As they made their way back to the village, the weight in Abeke's chest grew heavier. They passed by the towering baobab tree, its roots sprawling like ancient hands gripping the earth. It was a place of safety, a place where stories were told and promises were made. Yet today, even the baobab seemed to wear a shadow. When they reached the village, the mood was tense. People spoke in hushed whispers, and the elders gathered near the council hut, their faces grave. Abeke pulled Ofori close as they passed by. Abeke, Kwame's voice called out. He jogged toward her, his hunting spear slung over his shoulder. His usually easy smile was gone, replaced by a look of unease. Did you hear? Hear what? Abeke asked, frowning. Kwame glanced over his shoulder before leaning in. There's a stranger in the forest. Old Nee spotted him this morning while checking the traps. A stranger? Abeke echoed, her heartbeat quickening. Strangers didn't come to their village. Not unless they were trouble. Kwame nodded, lowering his voice. Nee said he was pale-skinned, like the ones who come with chains. Abeke froze. Her stomach turned to ice, and her grip on Ofori's hand tightened. The stories were true then. The stories of slavers who came from across the sea, who stole people from their homes and turned them into property. What do the elders plan to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. They're meeting now to decide, Kwame said. But it doesn't look good, Abeke. We need to be ready. Ready. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud. How could they ever be ready for something like this? That night, the village gathered under the baobab tree. The elders stood in a circle, their faces lit by the flickering flames of a central fire. Abeke sat on the ground with Ofori, who leaned against her shoulder, yawning. Around them, the villagers whispered anxiously. Elder Nana, the oldest among them, raised his hand and the murmurs quieted. His voice, though aged, carried the weight of authority. Our hunter, Nee, has brought us grave news. A stranger was seen near the western forest. A pale-skinned man. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. People clutched their children, and the air grew heavy with fear. These men are not friends, Nana continued, his voice steady. They are slavers. They come to take our brothers and sisters, our sons and daughters, and sell them like cattle. The villagers erupted into frantic chatter. Abeke held Ofori close, her heart pounding. She had heard the stories, but never thought it could happen to their village. Elder Nana raised his hand again, silencing the crowd. We must be vigilant. We will set up watches at the edge of the forest. Our hunters will sharpen their weapons, and we will fight if it comes to that. But we're just a small village, one woman cried out. How can we fight them? They have guns, do they not? A younger elder, Adu, stepped forward, his expression firm. We may be small, but we are not weak. The baobab tree reminds us that our strength lies in our roots, in our unity. If we stand together, we can protect what is ours. Abeke felt a spark of hope at Adu's words, but it was quickly extinguished when another elder spoke up. We must also prepare for the worst. If they come, we must hide the children and the weak. The crowd murmured in agreement. Abeke's eyes fell on Ofori, who had fallen asleep against her. The thought of losing him, of seeing him taken away in chains, was too much to bear. After the meeting, Abeke approached the elders. "I want to help." Nana looked at her with kind but tired eyes. "Abeke, you're young. Your role is to stay safe, to protect your brother." "I can do more," she insisted. "I know the plants in the forest. I can make traps, poison their food, anything." The elders exchanged doubtful glances. "We will consider it," Nana said, though Abeke could tell he didn't believe her plan would work. That night, as the village prepared for what might come, Abeke sat beneath the baobab tree, her mind racing. The firelight danced on the tree's bark, casting shadows that seemed alive. She looked at Ofori, who was curled up beside her, clutching their mother's shawl. "I'll protect you," she whispered, brushing a curl from his forehead. "I'll protect all of us." Above her, the baobab tree stood tall, its roots gripping the earth as if to say, "Hold fast. You are stronger than you know," and Abeke vowed to be just that, strong. The village was quiet, wrapped in the soft hum of crickets and the rustling leaves of the baobab tree. A cool breeze whispered through the huts, carrying the scent of freshly ground millet and burning lanterns. Abeke lay in her corner of the hut, staring at the low, thatched ceiling. She couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. Her brother, Ofori, snored softly beside her, his small body curled like a kitten. Abeke smiled faintly, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. She had promised to keep him safe, no matter what. And tonight, that promise weighed heavier than ever. Then it came, a distant thud. Abeke froze. Another thud. Then another, like footsteps pressing into the earth. She sat up, heart racing. The village drum sounded suddenly, its deep, urgent beat filling the night. It was a warning signal. The sound sent icy dread through her veins. "Abeke! What's happening?" Ofori stirred, his wide eyes glowing in the dim light. "Sure." Abeke pressed a finger to her lips, pulling him close. "Stay quiet. Stay with me." The next moment, the night shattered. Shouts and screams erupted from outside. Flames leaped into the air as torches lit the village paths. Abeke peeked through a crack in the wall and saw them. Men in tattered clothes, their faces cruel and their hands gripping ropes and weapons. The slavers had come. The village burst to life. Men grabbed spears. Women hurriedly ushered children into hiding places, and the elders called out instructions over the clamor. Abeke's mother rushed into their hut, her face pale but determined. "Take Ofori and hide," she ordered, shoving a small wooden charm into Abeke's hand. It was shaped like a tiny baobab tree, smooth and warm from years of being held. "Whatever happens, you keep this. It will guide you. Now, go." Abeke nodded, grabbing Ofori's hand and pulling him toward the back of the hut. Her legs felt shaky, but her mind was sharp. She knew the hiding spots under the roots of the baobab, where the earth dipped into shadows. But the slavers were quick. As Abeke and Ofori slipped outside, they were spotted. "There! The boy!" one of the men bellowed. Abeke screamed, shoving Ofori behind her. The man lunged, but she grabbed a clay pot and hurled it at his head. It shattered, spraying water everywhere. "Run, Ofori! Run!" she yelled, shoving him toward the tree. Ofori hesitated for just a moment too long. Another slaver, faster than the first, grabbed him by the arm. Ofori shrieked, kicking and flailing, but the man hoisted him onto his shoulder like a sack of grain. "No!" Abeke screamed, charging toward them. She clawed at the man's arm, but he swatted her away like she was nothing. She hit the ground hard, her vision swimming. "Stay down, girl," the man sneered, his voice thick and cold. He turned and strode off, Ofori's cries growing fainter as they disappeared into the chaos. Abeke lay there, gasping for air. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Keep him safe. Whatever happens. But Ofori was gone. When the slavers finally left, the village was in ruins. Fires smoldered. Huts lay in pieces, and the once proud baobab tree stood surrounded by broken branches and trampled earth. Survivors emerged cautiously, their faces drawn with fear and grief. Abeke's mother found her near the edge of the tree, her dress torn and her hands trembling. "Ofori," Abeke choked out. "They took him." Her mother's face crumpled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she placed a hand on Abeke's shoulder, steady and strong. "Then you bring him back." Abeke's head snapped up. "You are my daughter," her mother said firmly. "You have the strength of our people. You have the roots of the baobab." She touched the charm hanging around Abeke's neck. "This is not the end, Abeke. It is only the beginning." As the sun rose over the smoking remains of the village, Abeke stood beneath the baobab tree. Her fists clenched the charm tightly. She stared into the forest where the slavers had disappeared, her heart burning with fury and determination. "I will find you, Ofori," she whispered, "no matter what it takes. I will bring you home." The tree's massive branches seemed to reach out toward her, as if offering their strength. The breeze rustled its leaves, carrying a faint, whispered promise. "You are not alone." Abeke took a deep breath and turned toward the forest. Her journey had begun,